Tell Show. Welcome back. We're thrilled to have M. Carpenter, one of our regular with us. Usually have her on for legal news and things like that, speaking lawyery things and big words that we don't understand, and she has to explain to us. Going to have a little bit more fun because her other passion is true crime stuff. And M, seem to really be in a renaissance period with true crime stuff, don't we?
Yes. Yep. It's great to be a true crime fan these days.
Some of the ones that really jump out at you, because obviously there's all kinds of documentaries on the streaming services. Everybody has their favorite podcast, things like this, but you are also an attorney. You've been a prosecutor. You've actually investigated crimes. You know more about this than the average viewer does. Which ones really jump out at you as quality true crime programs?
I prefer podcasts mostly these days. It just fits in better with my time because I can listen while I'm cleaning or cooking. And there are a few good ones. Depends on your view of things. A lot of people don't want to have comedy mixed in with their true crime. They find it disrespectful, and that's understandable. But there are a few that are sort of funny podcasts that I enjoy. My Favorite Murder is one of them. Another that I enjoy is called Sinisterhood. One of the hosts of Sinisterhood is also an attorney, and she's also a stand-up comedian, her and her co-host. So there's some comedy in there, but she's also knowledgeable, and she does a good job of explaining quirks in the law that a lot of podcasts don't have the knowledge to explain. So they just kind of skirt around them or say, "What's up with that?" or "Why is that? Why are they doing that?" Where she can explain that. But there's a little humor in there, and I like that. Another one of the first podcasts of true crime that I listened to is called Generation Why, WHY. And it's not so much funny as serious, but they're very respectful. And they do a good job of finding the real facts of the case and not just the media speculation. They do their own research. So I prefer those. On TV, Forensic Files is a longtime favorite of mine. It seems to always be on. And I always joke when I go travel somewhere, if I'm alone in a hotel room, I can turn my TV on at any time and find Forensic Files. And so that's one of my favorite go-tos. And there's some good sort of one-off mini-series that come up on Netflix that are worth watching. And it really runs the gamut from complete exploitive crap to good quality shows. So I'll watch any of it, really.
Well, with that high standard in mind, but what is it about true crime? Because we've always had a fascination with it, just as human beings. Of course, with technology now, we can all kind of get a la carte whatever we want. What is it about true crime that always fascinates people so much? What is it that do you think? Obviously, you're a big fan of the genre, but when you try to discuss this with other people that maybe aren't a fan of it, what do you think it is about the human experience that they just get sucked into these true crime stories?
I think it fascinates a lot of people to realize just how terrible one person can be to another. It's outside of most of our experience to imagine the terrible things that happen to people. And so I think it's just sort of the curiosity of people who are among us, but so unlike us. My true crime interest goes back to my childhood. And I remember hearing about Ted Bundy. And this was when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, because, that was the early 80s, right? So, but I remember hearing about it. I don't know if my mom was talking about it or if I had read about it, because I did read newspapers and things even at that age, because I was a weird child. But I recall, it's very cringy to think about now, but I remember my first grade teacher asking all of us in the class if we would, what we would do to make the world a better place. What change would we make in the world? And when it was my turn, I said, executing Ted Bundy. which was probably an odd thing for my teacher to hear out of her first graders. So my fascination goes way back. And so I don't really know what started it other than just maybe the same thing where people enjoy scary movies, something that scares them. It's just that these are real life monsters and real life bad guys.
Yeah, talking to M. Carpenter, who is a real life attorney, but likes to stay at a Holiday Inn last night and solve crimes through her TV, like just about everybody else these days. We've talked about, and it's been kind of a thing for the last, I guess 15 years or so, but attorneys and legal experts have talked about the CSI effect, how that is affected when they go to pool juries and things like this, that sometimes these shows can have a negative effect because they think, well, everything can be solved by DNA, or you always have a clear-cut motive, these sorts of things. Do you think this is a positive or a negative, this current wave of true crime? Do you think it's improving overall knowledge of the criminal justice process, or do you think it's hurting?
I think it's improving in some ways. I do. I think that people are becoming more educated. Now, as an attorney, depending on which side of the courtroom you're on and the strength of your case, an educated jury is a good thing or a bad thing. If you have a weak case as a prosecutor, a smart jury is not a good thing for you. But the CSI effect, that's definitely real. People are waiting for that bombshell DNA testimony, the expert to come on and testify that the defendant's DNA was at the scene. And that happens quite a bit, but it doesn't happen in every case. So it can definitely be harmful. The jury has to understand that lack of DNA evidence does not mean this person is not guilty. Likewise, the presence of their DNA, depending on circumstances, doesn't necessarily mean anything. My DNA would be expected to be in my husband's car. So if he would turn up dead and they search the car, yeah, sure, they're going to find my DNA. That doesn't prove anything. So it's all in perspective, every situation. It's up to the attorneys to do a good job of explaining that and arguing that to a jury.
Yeah, talking to M. Carpenter. Let's take something that really well. Some of these cases go viral. We've talked about the cases that have shown up on viral podcasts or on viral shows, and then they debate, innocence or guilt or these things. And then there's ones like you've tried to cover, like the Clarksburg VA serial killer, that doesn't seem to get any traction at all, even though it seems to be an amazing story. Talk about it from your end as a content creator, because you're also a writer. You're not just an attorney. You're a senior editor at Ordinary Times. You do great writing every week. Talk about it from that end of when you get a true crime story that needs to be told, like this VA one, and it just doesn't seem to get the traction you think it should. Talk about it from that angle.
Sure. I think there's a lot of it has to do with victimology, which is a real word used by criminologists. The type of victim has a lot to do with how much coverage a case gets. Unfortunately, we saw that, over the summer with Gabby Petito, which was contrasted beautifully on your show with Molly McCluskey, talking about the Indigenous women and Indigenous people that have gone missing and have not been covered by our media. So, and in the VA case, it was elderly men. They were, some of them probably nearing the end of their lives. And so there's sort of I don't want to say meh, but that's kind of what some people maybe don't have interest in, that because it's sort of, it's not a young, attractive person with their entire life ahead of them, that, something you don't expect to a life you don't expect to end so soon. So it could be part of it. And then, of course, being an angel of death is the type of killer. That's a complete own category in and of itself that is not necessarily as interesting to some people because it lacks the blood and gore. I find it very interesting, the contrast between a caregiver and the exact opposite of that, becoming a murderer. So I think that the victim has a lot to do with it. Sometimes the perpetrator, there's a lot of fascination with the typical serial killer, out on the street, stranger danger type of serial killer that is actually pretty rare despite all of the publicity that they get. those are obviously they get a lot of attention. I think they speak to a lot of fear that especially young women have. And, women are, I believe, and I'm correct in saying, the majority of true crime fans by a lot. So, yeah, I think it just depends. It's the things that capture our imagination because we can relate to them. And maybe a lot of us can't relate to 80-year-old men in a veterans hospital, or we don't relate to or know much about Indigenous people. We do know, the people who look like us or the people we see every day around us in our neighborhoods and our towns. And so when something happens to someone that we relate to, I think we pay more attention.
Yeah, talking to Em Carpenter about some true crime. We're going to get into some of those things with her as we continue on Her Tell right after this. And we're back with Em Carpenter, our legal eagle. She's usually here to talk about the Supreme Court or a past law or something like that. But today we're talking about her personal passion for true crime and the gory details, as it were. Why is it, you mentioned that women are predominantly kind of the demographic for a lot of this. Why is it? It's not just the stories, obviously. It's not just, a demographic when they develop the TV series for these things. Why do you think it is? You is one, I isn't, obviously. What is it about women and the true crime genre, do you think?
I think a lot of it has to do with being protective of oneself. I think there's a feeling that if we know more about it, if we know what's out there, we can protect ourselves from it. And I think that might be part of it for me anyway. I guess I can only speak for myself, but I always feel empowered by knowledge. The more I know, the better I feel, the safer I feel. It may be a false sense of security, but to me, knowing about these things, knowing they're out there, being aware of them, makes me feel like I can do more to keep myself safe. And I can't speak for everyone, but that's part of it for me. And part of it is just morbid fascination, as I spoke about before, just knowing what can actually happen, the fascination of what a person is able and capable of doing to someone else that I know that I could never fathom doing. Just it's probably a combination of those things, but I think that women just want to know, what situations can I avoid, or what can I do to not fall prey? And there's a danger in that, because I think serial killers, for example, there's a lot of serial killers who have preyed on sex workers, and so women might think, well, I'm not a homeless, drug addicted sex worker, so I'm not in danger. So I think that's part of it, is trying to separate ourselves from the type of person who falls victim to these things. Again, that would be a false sense of security. Obviously, it can happen to anyone. So, but that's my theory on why women in particular are drawn to it.
What about the ongoing online theory / joke that all true crime watching by women, especially women that are in a relationship, is really just planning ahead and research?
No comment.
I'm sure your husband will be thrilled to know that. Em Carpenter joining us. You're somewhat outside of the system, even though you're an attorney. You've been a prosecutor. You've done these kind of cases, but you've also been a writer. You're a content creator now. You do shows like mine. What would you tell somebody that has one of these true crime stories, or they know of some kind of a true crime stories, and they want to try to get it some traction? And firsthand, because you've had to both defend and prosecute these cases where the system sometimes don't listen to folks. How would you tell them to use this new technology and use the ability of these hosts and all these online sleuths and these sorts of things to try to get their story out?
Well, I would say just to get your story out however you can. Put it on your own blog, submit it to other blogs, submit it to Ordinary Times. We can get it out there. social media is a big way. There are a lot of podcasters who ask for recommendations of stories they should cover, and they sometimes some specifically will look for lesser known stories. There's a really good podcast called The Fall Line, and it focuses on little known cases in the southeastern United States. Some in your area there, North Carolina, they've done series on. So, you can tweet at your favorite podcasters or go to their web pages. They may have a submission button. You can put it in there. And especially if you've already written it up, if you've already created an article or something that the podcaster can look at and get the details of. And if you're comfortable doing so, volunteer to be their guest to talk about the case, depending on your level of knowledge. So there are several ways. And I think just, using social media to your advantage and being persistent is the best way to go.
All right, I'm going to give you the time to do this because I know you've just been chomping at the bit to do it. But you have to explain to us, because some of us don't understand it, what in the world a murderino is.
Yeah, this is the first podcast I mentioned, which is called My Favorite Murder. Probably was my favorite for a long time. I even went to watch it live. But the fans of the murder of My Favorite Murder podcast are called the Murderinos. And then there are several, probably hundreds of Facebook groups of murderinos of various stripes. There's the Purderinos, there's our cat owners. There's Mountain Murderinos, West Virginia based. My Favorite Murder fans, I'm in that group as well. And my personal favorite is the Lawyerinos, of which I am a member in good standing as the legal minded or legal profession fans of the show. That's my main group. So we're just a community of true crime fans who happen to enjoy that one particular podcast.
If you were talking to somebody who was trying, just as a way to kind of wrap up our time with M. Carpenter today, what's kind of the entry drug into true crime? I know people like the detective shows on TV. You mentioned Forensic Files, which is kind of a long-standing one. What would you say the good gateway drug for folks looking to get into the genre is?
Well, I think that the true crime documentaries like Forensic Files and Cold Case, things like that, if you can get it, the old City Confidential, those were really good. They're not all, necessarily serial killers. There's a lot of just small town crime that is an interesting story that you can get into. So I would start there. And then, if you have a long drive or a boring cleaning or cooking chore coming up, pop one on your podcast. There's a million of them. Just pick one and go with it. I think that you can't go wrong. Throw a rock.
And that's M. Carpenter with us today on Heard Tell. Ma'am, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.